My name is Maya Reynolds. I was 27 when I walked into a crowded auction hall and sat in the very last row, like I didn't belong there. The room smelled like burnt coffee and old paper. Men in suits leaned forward, whispering numbers under their breath. Up front, my brother Logan sat like he already owned the place. My mother's fingers worried a string of prayer beads. My father kept scanning the room, as if someone richer might swoop in and save him. The auctioneer lifted his gavel. I raised my paddle once. Calm, quiet, final. They thought they were closing a door. They didn't realize they were opening something else. Before I go on, tell me where you're listening from. If you've ever stayed quiet just to keep the family calm, stay with me. I did too, for a long time. I grew up in a small house on a quiet suburban street where everything looked stable from the outside. White siding, a short driveway, a mailbox with our last name in fading black letters. Inside, there was always the low hum of the HVAC and the soft glow of the TV news at night. Bills were taped to the fridge with magnets. Coupons were stacked on the counter. My mother, Tracy, liked to say we were careful with money, which really meant I was anxious about it. From as far back as I can remember, I was the careful one too, the quiet one, the kid who did her homework at the kitchen table while my mom clipped coupons and my dad, Mark, scrolled through headlines. They liked that about me, or at least, they liked how little trouble it caused them. When relatives came over, they'd smile and say, "Maya's easy, she doesn't need much." Logan needed much, he always had. Christmas mornings were the clearest example. The living room would smell like pine and coffee gone cold. Wrapping paper everywhere. Logan would tear into big boxes, loud and fast. A new gaming system, expensive sneakers, something flashy that made my parents laugh and say, "He's going to love that." My gifts were smaller, practical, a backpack, a coat. One year, a calculator. My mum would hand it to me and say, "This is what you need. Honey." I learned early how to smile and say thank you without letting my face show anything else. I told myself it didn't matter. I was responsible. I understood. That word followed me everywhere. Responsible. It sounded like praise, but it felt more like a warning. In high school, I stayed late for study sessions and worked weekends at a grocery store. Logan bounced between interests. One month it was music, the next, cars, then some half-baked business idea he'd picked up from a podcast. Every time he failed. My parents rushed in to soften the fall. "He's figuring it out." My dad would say, "He just needs support." When I graduated, the ceremony was held in a stuffy gym that smelled like sweat and floor polish. I scanned the bleachers while my name was called. My parents weren't there yet. I stood alone, clapping for the kid before me, my hands shaking just a little. They arrived late, breathless, apologetic. Logan had something going on. My mum hugged me afterward and said, "You know how your brother is." I nodded. Of course I did. The one place I never felt invisible was my grandmother's kitchen. She lived a few miles away in a house that smelled like coffee and old books. She watched me closely, the way older people do when they're measuring something you don't yet understand. One afternoon, she pulled me aside while the others talked in the living room. She pressed an envelope into my hand and said quietly, "You'll need this someday." I didn't open it then. I didn't ask questions. I trusted her. Later, I learned what it meant. She had set aside money for my education. Not for Logan, not for the family. For me. It was the first time that anyone had drawn a clear line around my future and said, "This matters." That knowledge carried me through long nights of studying and early mornings before school. Whenever money came up at home, my mum would wave it off. "Don't worry about college," she'd say. "That's taken care of." I believed her. I believed them. I believed that being responsible would be enough. Looking back now, I can see the pattern forming, piece by piece, the praise for Logan's potential. The expectations were placed quietly on me. The way love seemed to come with conditions I never agreed to. At the time, I didn't call it favoritism. I called it family. I didn't know it then, but those small moments were teaching me my place. And one day, that lesson would come with a price tag I never imagined. By the time I was 16, school wasn't just something I did, it was the way I stayed afloat. I woke before sunrise to review notes at the kitchen table, the surface worn smooth from years of use. The house was quiet then, no TV, no voices, just the hum of the refrigerator and the scratch of my pen. I liked those hours. They belonged to me. When my acceptance letter arrived from my dream university, I sat on my bed and read it twice before it felt real. My hands shook, not from fear, but relief. I knew I could say yes. I didn't have to calculate tuition against hourly wages or decide which dream to cut first. The money my grandmother had set aside made the future feel solid, almost touchable. When I showed my parents, my mom hugged me tight. My dad smiled and said, "See, all that hard work paid off." Logan rolled his eyes and muttered something about college being a scam. No one corrected him. Around that time, Logan became obsessed with opening a bar. He talked about it at dinner like it was already a success. "Everyone drinks," he said. "It's easy money." My mother leaned forward when he spoke, eyes bright, like she was watching something bloom. I listened quietly, reminding myself that his ideas didn't affect me. My future was secure, or so I thought. There were signs I ignored, mail that disappeared quickly from the counter, a drawer in my parents' room that started staying locked. Once, late at night, I heard my parents arguing in low voices. Words floated down the hallway. Debt, timing, we can't tell her. I stood there in the dark, barefoot on a cold carpet, telling myself it wasn't my business. I didn't understand it then. I didn't want to. My grandmother passed away the summer before I was supposed to leave for school. The funeral was small, quiet. I stood near the back, hands folded, listening to people talk about her thriftiness, her discipline, her belief in education. No one mentioned the envelope. No one looked at me. Afterward, my mother squeezed my arm and said, "She'd be proud of you." I held on to that sentence like a promise. The betrayal came weeks later. On a Tuesday evening that felt painfully ordinary. My parents sat me down at the kitchen table. Papers were spread out in front of them, mixed in with grocery receipts and car keys. My mother spoke first, too calmly. "We used the college fund," she said. For a second, I thought I'd misheard her. The words didn't land right away. My father stared at the table. "It's for Logan," he added. He needed capital. I remember the heat rising in my chest, the way my ears rang. I said the money was mine, that Grandma had left it for me. My father finally looked up, his voice sharp. "Don't be selfish." My mother followed, softer but worse. "You're smart. You'll figure it out. Loans, jobs. Girls don't need degrees the way boys do anyway." Something in me went very still. Logan walked in then, smiling, jingling his keys like a trophy. "You'll thank me one day," he said, clapping my shoulder. No one asked how I felt. No one waited for my answer. The decision had already been made. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle. I wasn't just losing money. I was losing the story I'd been told about my place in this family. The belief that being responsible meant being protected. In that silence, I realized something that would change everything. Nobody was coming to fix this for me, and if I wanted a future, I would have to build it myself. The weeks after that conversation passed in a blur of paperwork and exhaustion. I didn't go to my dream university. I enrolled at a local college instead, the kind people call practical when they're trying to be kind. I signed loan documents with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Each signature felt like a small admission of defeat. I picked up extra shifts at the grocery store, early mornings, late nights, the kind of tiredness that seeps into your bones. At home, everything acted normal. That was the strangest part. My parents talked about dinner plans and weather like nothing had happened. Logan talked non-stop about the bar, the name, the lighting, the vibe. He said our family business a lot, like I was part of it. I nodded and kept quiet. I was learning how much silence costs. The bar opened 3 months later. I wasn't invited. I found out through social media. Photos of my parents cutting a ribbon beside Logan. All smiles and champagne flutes. My mother wrote, "So proud of my son." There was no mention of where the money came from. Nina sent me a screenshot Logan had posted privately. "Thanks, Mum and Dad, for believing in me." I stared at her longer than I should have, then locked my phone and went back to work. I asked my parents once for a copy of the trust documents. Just to understand. My mother waved me off. "You don't need to dig into that," she said. My father added, "Why are you making everything about money?" The question landed wrong. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about why they were so afraid of paper. That fear became clearer a few months later when I ran into Calvin at the bank. He recognized me from before. Asked how school was going. I told him the short version. He hesitated, then said carefully, "I remember a withdrawal that didn't match the stated purpose." He didn't say more. He didn't have to. I thanked him and walked out into the parking lot with my heart racing. For the first time, I knew this wasn't just betrayal. It was sloppy. Around then. The tone at home shifted. Subtle at first, my parents started talking about moving forward and closing chapters. One Sunday night, they called a family meeting. Dinner was already on the table when I arrived. Logan and his wife, Brielle, sat close together. There was an envelope by my plate. My mother slid it toward me. "We just need you to sign this," she said, smiling too hard. "So everyone can relax." I opened it and read the words slowly. "Waive any claim. Release of interest." It was clean, professional, final. They wanted me to make it official, to sign away the right to even ask questions. I looked up and met my father's eyes. "I'm not signing this," I said. The room went quiet. Brielle shifted in her chair. Logan scoffed. My father's face darkened. "You're tearing this family apart," he shouted. My mother started to cry, talking about faith and forgiveness. I folded the paper and slid it back across the table. That was the moment everything changed. They weren't just taking from me anymore. They were trying to erase me. And for the first time, I didn't feel hurt. I felt clear. After that night, the air in the house turned sharp. Conversation stopped mid-sentence when I entered a room. My mother spoke to me like I was fragile glass. My father barely spoke at all. Logan didn't bother hiding his contempt. One afternoon, as I was heading out for work, he leaned against the doorway and said, almost casually, "You really think you deserve the same as me?" For what he smiled like he'd said something clever. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The question told me everything I needed to know. I moved out not long after. Nothing dramatic. Just a few boxes and a borrowed car. I rented a small apartment close to campus. The walls were thin. The carpet smelled faintly of cleaner. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3, classes during the day, coffee shop in the evenings, cleaning offices at night. My body ached constantly. There were mornings I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel, trying to remember why I was doing this. Then I'd think of that paper on the table, waive any claim, and I'd start the engine. Logan's bar didn't age well, at first. I was always busy with photos, smiling faces, neon lights. Brielle posted captions about living the dream. But behind the scenes, cracks showed. Vendors called asking for payment. A bartender I knew mentioned checks bouncing. My parents covered what they could, quietly funneling money his way while telling me I needed to learn independence. The irony wasn't lost on me. One afternoon, a letter showed up in my mailbox by mistake. It had been forwarded from my parents' address. A notice from the property manager. Past due rent, late fees, legal language. I read it twice, then once more. My hands were steady. This wasn't satisfactory, it was confirmation. The story they'd built around Logan was collapsing under its own weight. A few weeks later, I saw it online. A listing. Commercial foreclosure auction. The address matched the bar. I printed the page at the library and slid it into a folder with everything else I'd collected. Notes, dates, names. I didn't tell anyone. Not Nina, not friends. I kept going to class, I kept working, kept my head down. Silence, I'd learned, could be a weapon. My parents called more often after that. My mother's voice softened. My father asked questions about school he'd never asked before. They talked about family and letting things go. I listened. I said very little. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger burns too hot. This felt colder, more deliberate. The night before the auction, I sat alone at my kitchen table, the folder open in front of me. I looked at the waiver paper they'd wanted me to sign, the banknotes, the listing. I thought about my grandmother's kitchen, the envelope, the way she'd looked at me like she knew something I didn't yet. I slept for 4 hours. It was enough. By the time I walked into that auction hall, I wasn't the struggling daughter they remembered. I wasn't the quiet girl who swallowed disappointment. I was someone else now. Someone who read the fine print, someone who waited. And when the gavel finally came down, it wouldn't just end an auction, it would begin the consequences they never thought would come. The auction hall was louder than I expected. Chairs scraped the floor, papers shuffled. Someone coughed into their sleeve. The air smelled like burnt coffee and old wood, the kind of room that had seen 100 deals end badly. I took a seat in the back, my coat folded over my arm, my paddle resting against my leg. I kept my eyes down. I didn't need to see them yet. Logan sat in the front row like a man waiting to be crowned. His shoulders were squared. Brielle leaned in close, whispering. My mother held her prayer beads tight, lips moving without sound. My father kept scanning the room, hopeful and afraid at the same time. I noticed how none of them looked back. They didn't think they needed to. The auctioneer cleared his throat and began. The first bid went up quickly. Then another. The numbers climbed in clean, sharp increments. A man in a grey suit nodded without emotion. A woman 2 rows ahead raised a paddle once, then dropped out. The room settled into a rhythm. Call, pause, response. I waited. At one point, Logan turned and glanced toward the back. Our eyes met for half a second. He didn't recognize me at first, then he did. His smile faltered. He leaned toward Brielle and whispered something. She stiffened. When the price crossed a number that would have crushed him, I raised my paddle. Just once. Calm. No hesitation. The auctioneer acknowledged me and moved on. The man in the grey suit countered. I matched him. The room thinned. The pauses grew longer. My heart stayed steady. This wasn't anger. This was math. Logan shifted in his seat. I saw sweat at his temples. My mother's bead stopped moving. My father's foot bounced. When the auctioneer called the next number, the grey suit hesitated. The silence stretched. I raised my paddle again. The gavel hovered. Going once, the auctioneer said, "No movement," going twice. The gavel came down with a crack that echoed through the room. "Sold," he said, to Maya Reynolds. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the room filled with whispers. Chairs turned, heads craned. My mother's face was drained of colour. Logan's mouth opened, then closed. Brielle covered her lips with her hand, eyes wide. I stood and walked forward. Each step felt measured, deliberate. I didn't rush. I didn't smile. At the table, the title officer slid the papers toward me. I set my folder down beside them. It was plain, no labels. I opened it and placed 2 documents on top. A notarized note in my grandmother's handwriting, an email chain from her old attorney confirming the purpose of the fund. I didn't explain. I didn't need to. My mother saw it. Her breath caught. She knew what it meant. Not a lawsuit, not yet. But the truth, preserved, waiting. Logan stood halfway out of his seat. "You can't." He started, his voice thin. There was nothing else to say. I looked at him then, really looked. He wasn't losing a bar. He was losing the story he'd been protected by his whole life. I signed where I was told. The pen felt heavier than it should have. When I finished, I slid the papers back and stepped away. No speech, no victory lap. Just the quiet certainty of ownership settling in. As I walked past my family, I didn't stop. I didn't need their faces to confirm what I already knew. They had taken something from me years ago and called it necessary. Today, I took something back and called it final. Owning the building didn't change things overnight. It changed them slowly, quietly, the way real consequences do. Logan kept the bar open for a while, pretending nothing had shifted. He still walked through the front door like it belonged to him, still talked about his place. But every month, a rent check had to be written. My name was on the deed. My account was on the lease. Each signature dragged reality a little closer. He hated it. I could see it in the way his jaw tightened when he handed the envelope over, in the way he avoided my eyes. Brielle stopped posting photos. The neon smiles disappeared. Bills didn't. Math never does. Late notices followed, then excuses, then silence. I didn't argue. I didn't remind him of anything he'd said to me years ago. I let the paperwork speak. When the payment stopped, I sent the notice of default. Standard language, professional tone. No family meetings, no tears, just terms. The bar closed 3 months later. One morning, I drove past and saw the windows dark, the door locked, a small sign taped crookedly to the glass. I sat in my car for a minute longer than I needed to. Not celebrating, not grieving, just breathing. It felt finished. I found a new tenant within weeks, a restaurant chain looking to expand, long-term lease. Stable income, the kind of deal that doesn't make headlines, but changes your life anyway. The building that once swallowed my future now paid it back. Month by month, my parents started calling more often. Softer voices, careful words. They talked about forgiveness, about moving on. I listened. I didn't agree to anything. Respect comes before reconciliation. They hadn't learned that yet. Then, one afternoon, my phone rang. An unfamiliar number. I answered out of habit. "This is Evelyn Ross," the voice said. "Your grandmother's attorney. There's something else she left behind. Not money." I looked at the folder still sitting on my table. I didn't ask questions. I just said, "Okay. Some stories don't end when the gavel falls. Sometimes, that's only when the real ones begin." The first morning after everything settled, I sat alone at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. My shoulders ached, my jaw felt tight, like I'd been clenching it for years and only just noticed. Winning hadn't felt like joy. It felt like the moment after a long storm, when the air is still heavy and you're too tired to celebrate surviving it. A few days later, I went back to the building. Not during business hours, early morning, before the street filled up. The metal gate was half down. Inside, the space smelled like old grease and cleaner. The lights were off. I stood there longer than I planned to, hands in my pockets, listening to the building breathe, HVAC humming, pipes ticking. It felt strange, being the owner and still feeling like a guest. I walked through slowly, one room at a time. In a back office, I found a small box tucked into a drawer that hadn't been cleared out yet. Inside was a folded note, yellowed at the edges. My grandmother's handwriting, not about money, about work, about patience, about not letting anyone convince me I was asking for too much when I was only asking for what was fair. I stood there holding it, feeling the weight of what she'd protected and what she couldn't. She had believed in me. She had tried. But she hadn't been there when it mattered most. Nina stopped by later that week. She didn't bring advice. She didn't bring apologies on anyone's behalf. She just sat with me on the floor while I sorted papers into neat piles. At one point she said, quietly, "I should have said something sooner." I nodded. I didn't rush to forgive her. I didn't need to punish her either. Some things just sit where they land. My parents reached out again. Awkward messages, half-finished apologies. I answered when I felt steady enough. I told them the truth, that I wasn't angry, but I wasn't willing to pretend anymore. That if they wanted a place in my life, it would be on new terms, clear ones. They didn't respond right away. That told me everything I needed to know. Healing, I learned, wasn't dramatic. It was practical. I changed the locks. I cleaned out one drawer and left another untouched. I chose paint colors without asking anyone's opinion. Small things, ordinary things. They mattered more than speeches ever could. I would trade the building, the money, all of it, for one moment when my parents chose me while they were alive enough to mean it. But I don't get to rewrite their choices. I only get to decide what I accept now. That night, as I turned off the lights, my phone buzzed with a voicemail from Evelyn Ross. I haven't listened to it yet. Some truths are better faced when you're ready. And for the first time, in a long while, I was paying attention. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, subscribe. This story isn't just about money. It's about what people show you when they think you won't fight back. Share this with someone who got hurt by family decisions. And tell me in the comments what you would have done if you were me. I read every story. Sometimes, the quiet ones matter most.